Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to The Scope, which is our series on the science, medicine, health and politics of health and wellness. And I'm delighted this afternoon to have our guest, Daniel Rodriquez, join us from Madrid. Daniel is a health coach, an entrepreneur. He has founded and operates a boutique fitness studio in Madrid, and he's an expert on personal training and metabolic health, and an ideal person to talk to us about some topics that are very pertinent in this crisis and actually in general. Daniel, delighted to have you with us. You're very welcome.
Same here. My pleasure, and thanks for inviting me over.
Daniel, you're coming to us from Madrid this afternoon, and obviously, like the rest of the world, we're all dealing with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. How are things where you are today? I know you've been in lockdown for some considerable length of time.
Yeah, I mean, we started at my home. We started to kind of have a little plate in the kitchen where we changed the number of days we've been hunkering down, so to speak. And this morning we wrote down 58 on that board. So I have been going out every now and then for shopping and chores, but our kids, I have 3 kids, and they've been inside for 58 days now.
And is there any sign on this phase ending for you?
Well, just yesterday, the government approved an extension for this confinement. It's a legal form that we have in Spain, which is an alarm state. Which means that there's an emergency and there are special powers given to the government under those circumstances, and there's tighter control on movement of the population. And they just agreed on a further extension of that situation just yesterday at Congress for another 15 days. But they're saying that they are foreseeing further extensions, although officially, we've entered into what they're calling the de-escalation process, which for us has 4 phases. We're in phase 0 at the moment, which is like a preparation, where only certain businesses and under tight health security measures are allowed to open. And if figures, the positive news is that figures seem to be trending in the right direction, that there are less and less people, new infections, and there are more and more recoveries. And so on the basis of the evolution of those numbers, they will then enable different regions of the country to progress to further stages.
Well, I know you also operate your studio from your home, which is wonderful. But I guess none of your clients have been able to travel, so you've been pretty much professionally in lockdown as well as personally in lockdown for the duration. How have you coped with that, and how do you think your business is going to have to change to cope with the evolution you're going through?
Yeah, I mean, the studio's been closed since the 13th of March. When this special situation, the state of emergency was declared, and obviously we haven't been able to serve our clients because our business is pretty much it's not a virtual training environment. We actually have a lot of technology, and people need to be present in order to use it. We're hoping to be able to open as of Monday. I'm going to send out a communication actually today to all our members, and we'll do a sort of a soft opening on Monday for those that are able to travel. So basically, businesses that are allowed to open are those that operate on a one-to-one basis and are by appointment only, and that's our model and our situation is a one-to-one. This is not like a gym where people just turn up and do the thing. It's a one-on-one relation, and so I think we qualify to open next week. We will be doing it with all sorts of precautions, but we expect that not all of our members will be able to turn up. There are question marks everywhere in terms of from which locations can people make the journey to come over here justifiably and might not be challenged if they are stopped by the police. So we're just going to make our space available, and we do it from a position of service and a position of trying to recuperate as much normality as we can, and in a way saying no to fear. But it's pretty much uncharted territory.
Well, let's get into the meat of what it is. You and I share many things in common, I think, but one of the main ones is a shared interest in metabolic health. And I guess before I delve into and pick your brain on that, tell us how you got into this type of work. How did you come to your current program?
So it was, in a way, scratching my own itch. I was basically a busy professional, busy father, and as you progress in life and you get more and more responsibilities, the time that you have available for yourself, for self-care, gets more and more compressed. So, but on the other hand, I was very much aware that that was something that I needed to take care of. So, as part of my journey in the health and wellness space, I came in contact with this fantastic world of evidence-based fitness and technology-enabled fitness, which is basically based on a concept of hormesis, on the minimum effective dose, and that way you can actually achieve very good results with a relatively small time investment, and we can get into what that means later. But effectively, what I did through that journey was basically work out what were the exercise and maybe therapeutic modalities that made a bigger difference on your metabolic health. And the way I personally understand that, and that's where the name of my brand and my studio comes from, MitoLab. It comes from mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of our cells. They are the ones that are responsible for producing the energy that our bodies need to operate. And there's mounting evidence that the aging process is pretty much driven by decreases in the effectiveness of your metabolic machinery, on the health of your mitochondria. So what I've done with our studio is basically arrange a methodology that enables you to work out those mitochondria and ensure that the ones that you have are healthy and working as to full capacity, and that you're actually able to create new ones, because there's a progressive decline with age in the number of mitochondria in your cells, so that you basically maintain that machinery working as effectively, as efficiently as possible for the longest period of time. The idea being that we're aiming at longevity, and we want to, eventually, we're all going to die. But what we want to achieve is basically compress that period of our lives where we are going to start declining and have less capacity to operate in the world, and less quality of life. So what we're trying to do is have this protocol in place where, in a time frame that is realistic for everybody's agendas, we can ensure that all of that keeps operating at full capacity for the longest period of time, with the least amount of wear and tear on our bodies.
So you said a lot there, almost all of which I agree, with which I agree. But let's try and unpick it a little bit. Just describe for me, and I've been to your studio, which by the way is fabulous. I think is fantastic and you're to be congratulated on it. And I hope your clients can get back in there with you soon. But tell me, just walk our listeners through what a session might be like with you.
Essentially, we work on three basic modalities for what you might call fitness. So we look at three key parameters. One of them is strength, so muscle development. And as a surrogate of that, we're also looking at bone density. And your muscles are the biggest organ when it comes to your metabolic activity. They're very dense in mitochondria. They're the ones that burn your calories. So you want to prevent them from wasting away. And so what we do through a specific type of training and technology that I can tell you a little bit more about later is making sure that we keep those from declining, and if we can actually have them track up. It's amazing the capacity that the body has to respond to this stimulus. So we do strength training through a high intensity protocol, which is actually very intense, but very brief, because if you do something very intensively, you cannot do it for a long period of time, and very infrequent, because the actual magic happens in between training sessions. You're not going to be building muscle by training here. In fact, what you do is actually make your body a little bit weaker over here, and it's that stimulus that prompts the body to actually respond and generate an adaptation, which is to develop more muscle. So the magic is on the recovery, is in what happens between sessions. So we do those on average every 5 to 7 days. And the actual time in the session where you're actually working your muscles is 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. I know that for some people this might sound too good to be true and realistic, but when you get into the nitty-gritty of the scientific literature, is very much the truth, and is something that we test on a daily basis. That's actually the way forward. So we do that. That's 10-15 minutes of your session, and we also do exercise with oxygen therapy. So that's what you would call the cardio element. Although, in my opinion, there's a lot of cardio involved in strength training when you do it properly. But we do oxygen-assisted training on a static bicycle where you're actually hooked to a big bag full of air with a high concentration of oxygen, which mimics the effect of a hyperbaric chamber in a way, and also prompts that cardiovascular adaptation and improvements in the efficiency of hemoglobin to transport and release oxygen in tissues, which is very relevant these days of COVID. And then, as part of that session, you can have a little bit of vibration therapy included, sort of a vibration platform, which helps with lymphatic drainage. The lymphatic system is basically the mechanism that the body uses to detoxify. So when you walk, when you have a brisk walk, one of the benefits that you're getting is that you're actually moving those fluids in the lymphatic system. With our vibration platform, you can achieve those effects, the equivalent of a half-an-hour walk in a 5-minute vibration session. And we are adding modalities such as photobiomodulation, which is another great way of increasing the effectiveness of your mitochondria through light. And those sessions, they last 5-10 minutes. It's all you need if the dosage is appropriate. So typically a client spends an hour at the studio, and in that hour, they go through these different stages where we do a bit of strength training, a bit of cardio, a bit of photobiomodulation and vibration. And separate to the training session, we also do infrared sauna as a way to detoxify, and by that means reduce the burden on our cells that prevents mitochondria from operating optimally. So that's roughly a description of what we do. Is 1 hour per week. Obviously, there are clients that might want to come more than once, or you might want to come for a sauna. A sauna takes a little bit longer. It's between 30 and 45 minutes. That's a separate thing. But what the training that we do is done and dusted for the whole week in 1 hour.
Now, this kind of runs counter to what the trend has been in training for 30, 40 years, which when I was growing up was about how much pain and effort you could put in for the longest amount of time, the most every day in the gym, people running on the roads and so on. So what's the evidence that these short, sharp weekly sessions are as good or even better than this sort of protracted road running and treadmilling and bicycling over long durations and multiple days?
Yeah, I completely agree with you that's it's still in my case, there's a little bit of conditioning. We've sort of been I don't want to say brainwashed, but that's the paradigm that we've been all operating. Is like, if you can go 4 times to the gym in the week, it's better than 3, and if you can be there 2 hours, it's better than 1, and you should get really tired and sweat and feel that you've done a lot of work. But that sometimes flies in the face of all the evidence. There's a lot of literature, and perhaps if you want, we can provide links and papers that people can read and add it to the notes of the session. I don't want to get into all the detail, but the foundation is this notion of hormetic stress. So hormesis is this process whereby there can be too much of a good thing or too little. Or in other words, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So for any kind of stimulus, stress, task that you can accomplish, there's a sort of increased benefit that you get as you progress through the work load. But that's not a sort of infinite ascent. It comes to a point where you start not getting any benefits by performing higher work, and in fact you can start actually getting decreases in those effects. So it's this notion of the sweet spot. There's an area where you get maximum benefit, and what you tend to find in the literature is that area for things such as cardio and muscle training, it's actually pretty narrow. I mean, we tend to overdo it in general terms, overdo it in terms of the length of time that we engage in an activity, and underdo it in the intensity. So protocols such as, I don't know if you're familiar with Tabata, but this sort of high intensity, short interval type of training are the ones that present the body with a challenge, with a stressor that actually prompts the body to say, hey, actually the environment is telling us here that we are not sufficiently equipped to cope. For a moment there was a point where we actually were driven to our very edge of whatever it is we're doing, whether it's muscle contraction or heart rate, beats per minute. So we need to do something about it. We need to improve whatever it is so that next time we encounter that situation, we're able to cope.
Now, an obvious question for me, and as you know, I'm a cancer doctor, and we've talked about this, you and I, high intensity workouts like that have to be done safely. And so do you have to be kind of a fit young adult to do this? Or can you do this if you're older, or particularly if you've got sort of chronic medical conditions, such as many of my patients with cancer?
The thing is, the intensity of the stimulus is relative to the individual. So obviously I would not be subjecting an elderly individual to the same level of resistance that I would to an elite trainer. So the key there is that you should work intensively in relation to your capability. So you should push yourself to the limit of your own capacity, whatever that is at whatever stage. So in a way, the art and craft of the personal trainer here is to ensure that that stimulus is delivered to that point for each different person. But it often surprises me very much the levels of response that we get from the elderly population, because you would think, oh, you have to treat them carefully, and they're not going to get very far. But it's surprising, and there are scans and PET scans of the legs of a young triathlete compared to a 70-year-old triathlete in terms of muscle mass, and they are, if anything, the 70-year-old has bigger muscles. So the elderly population has bigger scope for improvement because they tend to be further down the line of decline, and they are the ones that in very short periods of time, and I'm talking about 1-2 months of training once a week, so 8 hours in a period of 2 months. Well, not even 8 hours, because that's the whole session. We just picked strength training. 80 minutes of strength training in 2 months can produce increases in strength that are amazing, like almost 100% increases of strength and muscle mass.
Daniel, in the current COVID crisis, there are reports suggesting that patients faring worse, of course, could be older, but also it seems evident they've poor metabolic health. So obesity and cardiovascular illness, diabetes, are really causing patients with COVID to do worse, possibly increasing their mortality. So this would seem to be another connection with the work you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is my hope that if anything comes out of this that is positive, is that the population will become more aware and more conscious of the importance of not just relying on the doctor to sort of fix things once they're broken, but to take responsibility of their own health and lifestyle, and make sure that they have, whichever it is, a way to maintaining those systems and these critical elements of the metabolic syndrome that you've mentioned, diabetes, hypertension, adipose tissue accumulation, those kinds of things in check, and there are ways, many ways of doing it. Everything that you do is positive, but there are better ways and not so good ways, or more efficient and effective ways of doing it, and that's what we try to do in our business, and that's the message that hopefully more and more we can throw out there, that it's not something unattainable, it's not something that you should kind of give up on before starting, that it's pretty much doable and within everybody's reach.
We should also mention, I guess, in addition to the steps that you're talking about, the importance of nutrition, stress reduction, adequate sleep, and all of those other factors that probably don't have time to go into today, but are equally important and relevant in this space.
Or even more, yeah. I mean, this is the icing on the cake once those foundations you just mentioned are in place. But as we progress through life and we age, these sort of things take on a greater importance to sort of provide our bodies with the support that they require. And there's also an important point that in relation to this subject, which is that in the unfortunate event that you do end up in hospital, being more resilient will increase your chances of actually making it out of that. A hospital environment, by definition, is not the healthiest place to be. So you're going to be exposed beyond whatever it is that got you there to a number of other factors. And muscle mass, for example, is a great predictor. After surgery, is a great predictor of survival rates and decreased recovery times. So there's also this element of being prepared for whatever life throws at us, and it will throw things at us all the time. So it is our responsibility to ensure that we're actively engaging in activities that make us harder to kill.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. We have an expression around here which says you need to be in the whole of your health to go into a hospital. Because I agree, it is the ultimate in stressful environments, and we certainly see that taken to its limits in the intensive care unit and what patients have had to deal with this crisis and others. So I suppose the one other thing that occurs to me, Daniel, is that I know from visiting your facility and talking with you, your plans have had to change, as all of our plans have had to change in the light of this. So as a business, if you're as an entrepreneur, you're talking to fellow entrepreneurs, what steps are you taking now to help yourself recover from this knock that we're all getting?
My hope is that places like mine are going to be in greater demand, because this is the kind of environment where, as a business owner, I can ensure that hygiene and sanitation and social distancing, if you like, can be enforced, because we're never more than 2-3 people in the room, including myself, and most typically it's just a one-to-one situation. So with big box gyms and fitness facilities being more and more limited in terms of the amount of people that they can receive, but also with this perception that hygienic conditions are going to be lower in those kinds of massive places, people will start turning their heads to other options. And we are a boutique minority kind of space, and I'm the first one to admit that, but I think more and more people will start realizing that maybe that's a better option. And particularly if they get these points about you don't need to spend a lot of time in the gym to achieve great results. So I'm hopeful that for places like mine, this is going to be a positive thing. But the other thing that I'm doing in my business is progressively more and more advising and consulting others in setting up their home gyms, because that's another alternative. You cannot go out, particularly for the most vulnerable population. If you cannot go out to get that training and the fitness, let's make sure that you can get that in your own home. And the type of solutions that I use are very small footprint. You don't need like one machine for every body part. It's not like you're setting up this huge operation. With very limited, reduced space, you can set up a complete gym that is very effective. So that's another sort of work stream that I'm pursuing, and we've made a few sales lately, and this is not cheap equipment. So I can definitely see that there's this awareness and willingness to invest in these sort of technologies.
Yeah. And I guess just like we're doing now, the use of technology to connect might allow someone to sit in their home and do some of this work, and you can connect virtually with them and coach them from a distance. It's as we're all doing now.
Absolutely.
The Zoom generation is definitely upon us here. Well, Daniel, you and I could probably talk on for several hours, as we have done in the past. It's really great to see you, albeit virtually, and to know you're bouncing back and ready to go next week. And I wish you well with your program, which I strongly believe in. There's many overlaps between what we do in the hospital setting and what you're trying to achieve in your program. And I agree completely with what you said about the need for us to intercede a hell of a lot earlier than waiting until somebody is at the cliff edge, be it with heart disease, cancer, or something like COVID, before they seek our care. So congrats on that. I wish you best, and let's hope we get to see each other in person soon.
Fantastic. And let me just finalize with something that is key, I think, that you and I have talked about for the future of medicine, for what comes next, and to making sure that this taking control of your own health is possible. The medicine of the future, I think, is a blend of your world and my world, of doctors sort of making recommendations, but then handing over patients to the care and advice of coaches that can take them through this journey and making those recommendations possible. So hopefully this is the beginning of a paradigm shift and the beginning of this blend, this new medicine that I see in the future, where doctors and allied professionals work together to improve the outcomes for patients.
I think that's a great suggestion and a great hope. And with that, we might close our interview. Thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you, Frank. Take care.